There is a time, and there is a season, a moment in history that is set apart. A moment that, though it seems like any other day, will define the course of your life and determine the fate of nations. And for some of you, that moment, that day is fast approaching. That day is April 25. God has appointed specific times and moments throughout history, and these moments, though often unnoticed in the present, have the power to reshape lives and nations. One such moment is approaching, April 25. It's not just another day on the calendar, it's a divine appointment, a turning point that, if you are prepared, can change the course of your life. This is not a time of coincidence, but a time that God has ordained. And as we look to the scriptures, we see that God has always had a plan for pivotal moments. Times when his hand reaches down and marks a shift in history, a moment that will decide the future. Think of the Israelites standing at the edge of the promised land. They had wandered in the wilderness for 40 years, faced battles, hardships, and doubts, and now they stood at the Jordan River, about to enter the land God had promised them. But that moment required something from them. They couldn't stay where they were. They couldn't simply wish for victory or hope that the land would fall into their hands. God had given them a promise, but they needed to act in faith to receive it. They needed to step into the waters before they would part. They needed to trust that God would make a way when there seemed to be no way. And when they acted, when they took that step of faith, God delivered, the waters parted, and the land was theirs. Similarly, April 25 is not just a day. It's a defining moment. A day that will separate those who are prepared and ready from those who stand still, waiting for circumstances to change on their own. God does not just move on his own. He calls his people to action. He calls us to step forward in faith, even when we don't understand how it will all unfold. It's a day when your fate, your future, could be decided by the choices you make, the steps of faith you take, and the trust you place in God's sovereignty. If you've been standing on the edge of something greater, whether it's a dream, a purpose, or a calling, this is your moment to act. Throughout history, we've seen that God's timing is not just about waiting for the right moment, it's about being ready when that moment arrives. Just as Noah had to build the ark before the flood, just as Esther had to step into the king's court for such a time as this. You are called to act at the appointed time. April 25 is not simply a date, it is an invitation. It is an opportunity that you must be ready to seize. This is the time to rise up, to move beyond the obstacles that have held you back. The giants in your life, whether they are fear, doubt, or circumstances, are not bigger than the God who calls you to move forward. Just as David faced Goliath with nothing more than a sling and a stone, you too can face whatever giants stand in your way. With God, victory is assured. But that victory comes through faith and obedience. And so, my friends, the question is not whether God will move, it's whether you will move with him. Will you take that step of faith? Will you trust that God is working behind the scenes, even when you can't see it? April 25 is a day that will test your readiness, your faith, and your willingness to trust in a God who is always faithful. Prepare your heart now, because this day will decide whether you step into your destiny or stay in the desert of what could have been. God is calling you to rise. The moment is coming, and you must be ready to step forward in faith. The time is now. April 25 is the day when your fate could be decided. Will you be prepared to take action and step into the future God has prepared for you? The choice is yours, but remember, the time to prepare is now. God has appointed moments throughout history where his plan intersects with the lives of his people. These moments are not random. They are purposeful, filled with meaning and divine intention. They are times when God's sovereignty meets human action, and when his will is revealed in ways that forever change the course of history. And one of those moments is approaching April 25th. When we reflect on the Bible, we see how God used specific times to bring about His will. Take the Israelites, for example. After centuries of slavery in Egypt, they found themselves standing on the edge of the Promised Land. The journey through the wilderness had been long and fraught with challenges, but God had a promise for them, yet they were required to act in faith. They had to cross the Jordan River, trusting that God would part the waters. Their breakthrough was not automatic. It was dependent on their willingness to move when God said, "Now is the time." Just as God appointed a moment for Israel to cross into the Promised Land, He has appointed a moment for you. April 25 could be that moment. This is not a mere passing day. It is an appointed time, a day that will determine the direction of your life, your future, and your purpose. God has already set the stage, but the question is, will you step into it? Will you act in faith, trusting that He has prepared a way for you? God's timing is perfect, but it requires that you recognize when the moment has arrived. Often we can become complacent, waiting for things to happen on their own. We wait for perfect circumstances, for everything to fall into place. But that is not how God works. Just as the Israelites had to step into the waters before they would part, you must step out in faith. God doesn't wait for you to feel ready. He calls you to step out even when you don't have all the answers. April 25 is that moment, the moment when you must decide whether to stay where you are or to take the leap of faith that God is calling you to. It is a moment that requires action, courage, and trust. The destiny God has for you won't simply fall into your lap. It requires obedience, just as it did for the Israelites at the Jordan River. But let me tell you this, when you act in faith, when you step forward in obedience, God will make a way where there seems to be no way. When the Israelites trusted in God's promise and stepped into the Jordan River, the waters parted. When you trust in God's timing and act in faith, He will open doors for you, make the impossible possible, and guide you toward the future He has prepared for you. This moment, this appointed time of April 25, could be the defining day in your life. Will you rise to the occasion? Will you recognize that God is calling you to something greater than you ever imagined? You may be facing obstacles, giants, or doubts, but remember, God is bigger than any challenge you face. Just as He made a way for His people throughout history, He will make a way for you. But you must choose. You must choose to move when He says now is the time. You must choose to believe that God's plan is greater than your circumstances, and you must choose to take action. The fate of your future is not something that will happen to you passively. It's something that you must actively pursue in faith. April 25 is more than a date. It is a moment where you can either step into the destiny God has for you or remain in the wilderness of what could have been. The choice is yours. Will you be ready? Will you act in faith and trust in God's timing? God's timing is a powerful force, one that operates beyond our understanding. It is a force that shapes the course of history and influences the lives of all who are willing to recognize and align themselves with it. We see this clearly in the Bible, where pivotal moments of divine intervention determine the fate of entire nations and individuals. In the same way, a moment is coming, April 25, that will play a decisive role in your life. It will be a time when God, in His perfect timing, will test your readiness, your faith, and your willingness to step into the future He has already planned for you. If we look back in history, we can see many instances where God moved at a specific time to fulfill His promises. Take the story of Abraham, for example. God made a promise to Abraham that he would be the father of many nations. But before that promise could be fulfilled, Abraham had to trust God's timing. He had to believe when God told him that his offspring would inherit a land, even though he didn't yet see it. God's promises are sure, but they are fulfilled in His time, not ours. Just as Abraham had to wait and act when the time came, so too must we recognize the times God has appointed for us. April 25 is one such appointed time. It is not a random day. It is a divine moment when you will have the opportunity to make a choice that will affect your destiny. Like the Israelites standing on the banks of the Jordan River, you are faced with a choice. Will you trust in God's plan and take the necessary steps to move forward, or will you remain where you are? The Israelites could have stayed in the desert, but God had a plan for them, and they had to take action to see it fulfilled. The same is true for you. God has a purpose for your life, but you must be ready to step out and move when the time arrives. This is a time of decision, a time when your future will be shaped by the choices you make. You might feel that you're not ready. You might feel overwhelmed by the obstacles in your path, but just like the Israelites had to trust God to part the waters of the Jordan River, you must trust God to make a way where there seems to be no way. The faith it takes to step into the unknown is the same faith that will lead you to the promised future that God has prepared for you. April 25 is not just another day. It is a moment of destiny, a day that holds the potential to change everything. God's promises are waiting to be claimed, but they are not automatic. They are given to those who act in faith. The Israelites had to step into the waters before they could see the miracle. You too must act in faith, trusting that God will provide when you step forward. You might be facing giants, difficulties, or uncertainty, but God is bigger than any obstacle. He has been preparing you for this moment, and when you step into the future He has set before you, you will find that He has already gone ahead of you, making a way through the wilderness. But you must trust Him, you must be ready, and you must act. April 25 is coming, and it is a moment that will define your future. Will you rise to the occasion, or will you remain where you are? The choice is yours. God's timing is perfect, and if you are ready, He will lead you into a future beyond what you can imagine. Don't let this moment pass you by. Prepare now, for the day of decision is near. The time to step into your destiny is now. Throughout the pages of the Bible, we witness the unfolding of divine moments that dramatically shape the destiny of individuals and nations. These moments were not random or by chance. They were appointed by God, and they always arrived at the perfect time. Just as the Israelites found themselves standing at the threshold of the promised land, their moment of destiny had arrived. They had been through trials, struggles, and waiting, but when the time came, God's call for action was undeniable. And in much the same way, April 25 will be your moment, your appointed time, where God calls you to step into the future He has set for you. God does not work on our timelines. He operates on His own, according to His wisdom and perfect understanding. We may not always see it or understand it, but His timing is always right. Take, for example, the story of Joseph. He went from being sold into slavery, thrown into prison, and facing injustice to eventually becoming the second most powerful man in Egypt. All the while, Joseph had to wait for God's timing to unfold. His journey wasn't easy, and it didn't make sense in the moment, but looking back, it is clear that God's hand was at work all along, orchestrating events at the perfect time for Joseph to fulfill his purpose. This is the power of God's timing. He places us where we need to be at the right time, and April 25th is one of those moments that has been set by God. It is a day that will test whether you are ready to move forward, whether you are willing to embrace what God has for you. Much like Joseph, you may have faced setbacks, struggles, and moments where it seemed like the dream or purpose God gave you was slipping away. But let me tell you, the appointed time is coming, and on April 25th, God is going to open doors, give you opportunities, and call you to act. In the Bible, we also see the example of Esther. She was a young woman who, by divine design, became queen in a foreign land. It wasn't by accident, and it wasn't just for her to enjoy the luxuries of royalty. She had been placed there for such a time as this, to save her people. When the moment came, she had to act with courage, faith, and obedience to God's calling, even when it seemed risky. She stepped into her purpose at the appointed time, and her faithfulness to that calling changed the fate of an entire nation. April 25 is your appointed moment. Like Esther, you have been placed in this moment of time for a purpose. But this purpose will not be realized unless you act in faith. God is calling you to rise up, to take a step forward in obedience, just as Esther did. This moment is not about waiting for things to change on their own. It's about stepping out in faith, trusting that God is already at work, and that when you move in alignment with His plan, His power will go before you. You might be facing challenges. You may feel overwhelmed by the obstacles in your path, but understand this: God will never call you to something that He will not equip you for. The Israelites had to cross the Jordan River, but God parted the waters. Esther had to speak up for her people, but God gave her the courage to do so. You too will receive everything you need to step into your destiny on April 25. The choice is yours, but the moment is coming. This is your time. This is the moment to trust in God's perfect timing. The days of waiting are over. The time to act is now. Will you step into your purpose, or will you remain in the desert of missed opportunities? The fate of your future is in your hands, and the appointed time is approaching. Will you be ready? Will you rise to the occasion? On April 25, destiny will be decided. Will you be prepared to step into what God has for you? The choice is yours. Throughout the Bible, we encounter moments of divine intervention where God calls His people to act, often in ways that require great faith and courage. These moments are not merely coincidental. They are divinely appointed, carefully orchestrated by God to bring about His purposes in the world. In the same way, April 25 is one of those divinely appointed moments that could decide the course of your future. It's a day that will test your readiness, your obedience, and your willingness to act on God's calling for your life. Consider the example of Moses, who was called by God to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. When God spoke to Moses through the burning bush, Moses had to make a choice. He could have stayed in the safety of his life in Midian, but God had a greater purpose for him. God's timing was perfect, and though Moses felt inadequate, afraid, and unprepared, he trusted in God's plan. Moses' obedience to God's call changed the fate of an entire nation. This divine moment wasn't just about Moses, it was about fulfilling God's purpose for Israel. In the same way, April 25 could be your appointed time, your moment to act on the calling God has placed on your life. The challenges Moses faced, fear, uncertainty, and doubt were real, but they didn't stop him from moving forward. Moses had to rely on God's strength, not his own. Similarly, you may be facing obstacles or feeling inadequate, but this is not the time to hold back. This is the moment to trust in God's power, knowing that He will equip you to fulfill the purpose He has set for you. Just as Moses was chosen for a divine purpose at the perfect time, you have been chosen to fulfill a purpose that will bring glory to God. God's timing is never rushed, it's always perfect. Just as He told Esther that she had been placed in her royal position for such a time as this, so too you have been placed where you are for a specific purpose. Your life is not a random series of events. It is part of God's grand plan. And April 25 could be the day when that plan begins to unfold in ways that will forever change your destiny. This is your time, your moment to step forward in faith and trust that God will provide everything you need to accomplish His will. The Israelites too faced a pivotal moment when they stood at the Jordan River ready to enter the promised land. But before they could experience the blessing, they had to take a step of faith. God instructed them to step into the river before He parted the waters. It was an act of trust and obedience. It wasn't enough for them to stay on the shore and wait for God to part the waters first. They had to move in faith even when it didn't make sense. In the same way, April 25th will require you to step forward in faith. You may not see the way ahead, but God is calling you to trust Him to move even when the path is not clear. This moment is a test. It's a test of your faith, your obedience, and your willingness to act on God's call. God is not waiting for you to be perfect before He moves. He is waiting for you to trust Him and step forward in faith. The choice is yours. Will you remain where you are, paralyzed by fear or uncertainty? Or will you take the step, trusting that God will lead you into the future He has prepared for you? April 25 is not just a date on the calendar. It is a moment that will define your future. Will you rise to the occasion like Moses, like Esther, like the Israelites at the Jordan River and embrace the destiny God has for you? The time to act is now. God has set this moment for you, and His timing is perfect. Don't let it pass by. Step into your purpose, trust in His plan, and believe that He will make a way where there seems to be no way. The future is waiting, and the time to step into it is now. The moment you are living in is not by accident. It is a divine appointment. Throughout history, we see that God moves at specific times to fulfill His will in the world. These moments are often unexpected and come when we least expect them, but when they arrive, they demand our action. April 25 is one such moment for you. It is not just another day. It is a day that holds the potential to change everything. It is a day that will decide your fate, your future, and the destiny that God has prepared for you. We have seen throughout Scripture how God works in appointed times to accomplish His purposes. Consider the story of David. A young shepherd boy forgotten by his family was anointed by God to become the king of Israel. When the time came, David didn't hesitate. He faced Goliath not because of his own strength, but because of his faith in God. His victory over Goliath marked the beginning of his destiny, but it all started with a moment of decision, a moment of trust in God's timing and plan. In the same way, April 25 will be your appointed time, the day when God calls you to step forward in faith, trusting that He will empower you to overcome the giants in your life. God's call is not always easy to hear. It doesn't always come in the form we expect. When God called Moses from the burning bush, Moses was reluctant, filled with doubt, and unsure of how he would lead the Israelites out of Egypt. But God wasn't concerned with Moses' ability. He was concerned with Moses' willingness to obey. Just like Moses, you may feel inadequate or unprepared for what God is calling you to do. But the key is not to focus on your limitations, but on God's unlimited power. He is the one who equips you, who strengthens you, and who makes a way when there seems to be no way. April 25 will be your moment to trust that God has already gone before you, preparing the way. You may not see the full picture right now, but God is working behind the scenes, setting everything up for your breakthrough. Your role is to trust in His timing and take the step when He calls. Just as the Israelites had to step into the Jordan River before the waters would part, you too will need to take that step of faith, trusting that God will move on your behalf. It's easy to get stuck in the desert of doubt, fear, and insecurity. But God is calling you to rise above those limitations. He is calling you to leave behind the comfort of the familiar and step into the unknown, knowing that He is with you. The time to step into your destiny is now. God is calling you to act on April 25, to step forward with faith, courage, and obedience. This is the moment that will decide the direction of your life. The future is not something that will simply happen to you. It is something that you actively participate in. April 25 is not a random day. It is a day of decision. It is a day when your faith will be tested. Will you take that step of faith, trusting in God's timing and plan? Will you rise to the occasion as so many of God's faithful servants did before you and embrace the purpose He has for you? This is your appointed time. The time to act is now. Don't wait for the perfect conditions. Don't wait for the perfect moment, because this moment is the one that God has set before you. Step forward in faith, and trust that God will make a way. Your destiny awaits, and it is time to step into it. The fate of your future is in your hands, and the moment to decide is now. Will you rise to the call